Ukraine just did the unthinkable. In a single coordinated strike, they wiped out a major Russian Special Forces base and an FSB intelligence headquarters deep inside Russia. This wasn't just a military action. It was a clear political message delivered to Vladimir Putin hours before his so-called peace meeting with the US delegation. Ukraine's message was simple. If Putin doesn't agree to a genuine peace, he can expect more strikes like these, and he can expect them anywhere. The strike on Chechnya, hundreds of miles from the front line, highlights a terrifying reality for the Kremlin. The Russian skies, from Moscow to Siberia and from Arctic to Chechnya, are completely undefended. All thanks to the very 3-day special military operation that Putin started. So let's look at how this all happened. We start with the attack on the Russian FSB building. On the night of December 2nd, Ukrainian armed forces carried out a drone attack on the building of the FSB in Atskoy district of Chechnya. As you'll soon see, it was a very busy night in Chechnya. But anyways, because of this drone strike, 2 FSB employees were injured and the building kinda burned down, as you can see from the picture on your screen. The reason I say kinda is I don't know if that's how all Russian buildings look anyways, or if that's because of the fire. Moving on. But Russian media and even Russian residents in the area talked about this drone strike, but according to Russian officials, nothing actually happened. Now, the delay on the statement could be because they're still trying to figure out how to explain everything that happened in the region, because this was not an isolated strike. Ukrainian drones also hit a military base of an elite Russian force. These were the Akhmat forces that are loyal to Chechnya's leader, Kadyrov. Take a look at this strike from a different angle. Now, for Ramzan Kadyrov, this was definitely a big hit because these forces are his forces and they're some of the best ones he had. Or I don't know how many survived, but yeah, maybe some of the best ones he had. On top of that, this force has actually fought on the front lines in Ukraine with deployments in Kharkiv and Donetsk. Now, if you look at the map of Russia, you realize that Chechnya is actually very far from the front lines, and it's very far from the Ukrainian border. That means there's a good chance that these drones may not be coming from Ukraine, but rather from Kazakhstan, which is very close to the Chechen region. That's something Russian propagandists are truly worried about, because that means Ukraine is able to launch drones from areas that Russia is just not protecting. Now, on top of that, if you watched yesterday's videos, you know that Putin has been stripping the whole country of air defenses and moving all the air defenses he has to protect the Moscow city. That means regions like Chechnya and like Dagestan are completely undefended, and that could create problems that Putin may not be thinking about. Chechnya was not a fan of being under the Russian Federation. Same thing with Dagestan at one point. Now, if they realize that they're not really benefiting from being part of this federation, Putin is just leaving them out to be dry, the Russian economy is going to shit, so Putin cannot actually fund these regions and give them the budget that they've been getting for the last 20 so years. Maybe they'll start thinking if they want to be part of the Russian Federation. Now, talking about the Chechen forces, it has been a rough few days to say the least for them, because just 2 days ago, Ukraine laid another trap for Chechen forces who were getting a bit too high on their own supply. This is the clip of the trap that the Ukrainian forces set. This happened on November 28th, so just 3 days ago, and it took place in the occupied region of Zaporizhia Oblast. Now, the area that you're seeing is apparently a common area that Chechen units use to sell stolen diesel. I don't know who they're selling it to, but we do know this is the area they use to do the deal, and they use it on a regular basis. Well, that created an opportunity for Ukrainian military intelligence, or HUR. That's why HUR worked with partisan groups in the area, and they set up mines all around this area. So the next time the Chechen fighters showed up to do their deal, things did not go according to plan. So, clearly, seeing all this, it was not a good night for Putin or the Kremlin, especially considering that the US delegation was visiting Moscow to present them with the peace proposal that US has negotiated with Ukraine. Now, if you guys remember, there was a 28-point plan that Kirill Dmitriev basically gave to Witkoff that US tried passing off as their own. But then this was negotiated down to 19 points, and then it went back up to 20 points, and now that's the plan US is presenting to Russia. Well, before this meeting took place, Putin held his own impromptu press conference, and it was filled with lies after lies. The first one was that the Russian army is surgically taking over Ukrainian cities. Take a look at what Putin means by surgically.
In Ukraine, we are acting in a surgical manner, carefully. This is not a war in the direct modern sense of the word.
Then he went on to blame the European leaders for warmongering, but last I checked, it was Russian soldiers who are in Ukraine illegally, and European soldiers are nowhere close. Nonetheless, Putin wanted this as like a setup so he can not agree to the peace deal and blame it all on Europe. Take a listen.
Thirdly, they have no peace agenda. They are warmongers. Even when they are trying, allegedly, to introduce some changes, some adjustments to the President Trump's proposal, all these changes have only one goal in mind. They are aimed at blocking and putting to a halt this peace process. They are trying to make demands that are unacceptable for Russia, and they understand this, and then later they would try to blame Russia, accuse Russia of stopping this peace process. This is their objectives, and we can clearly see that.
In reality, if the European army was actually in Ukraine, Putin would be flying out of his apartment window. I'm guessing that's why he doesn't have windows in his office. But anyways, Putin said to the world that it was the Europeans who did not want peace. Then, just hours later, we got the news that Russia went into the peace negotiations and did not agree to peace. As friend of the channel, Jason J. Smart reports, the actual talks lasted around 5 hours, but nothing was actually achieved. Putin himself showed up an hour late and then met with the US envoy that visited Kremlin. Outcome of these talks, no compromise on Ukraine from the Russian side. There's no meeting that's scheduled between Putin and Trump, and nothing has actually been achieved towards peace. Now, Russia is pretending to negotiate peace because Russia is actually benefiting from this gameplay that they're carrying out. Russia can delay sanctions that US may have put on their economy, and Russia can delay European countries from confiscating the $300 billion that are sitting in European banks. So for Russia, these talks dragging out is actually a really good news. Now, before I get to what comments Russia made after these talks, I want to show you guys who was at the talks and who wasn't. Pay attention. There is no Sergei Lavrov here. That means he has been exiled. He's the foreign minister and he wasn't there doing the foreign minister's job. I'm guessing this has to do with what I predicted just last week. Kirill Dmitriev is going for Sergei Lavrov's head and he wants to take over the foreign ministry. And it looks like he's succeeding, at least so far. But you never know with this Kremlin games. Things change very quickly. Now, let's get back to the comments Russia made after the talks concluded. And again, we have Russian aide publicly blaming Europe for everything, even though European leaders were nowhere close to the negotiating table. Take a listen.
Well, of course, our president spoke about his assessment of the destructive actions that we see the Europeans perform. Do you think the positions became closer after these talks, or so they drifted further away? Well, we did not drifted further away from each other, that's for sure, but there is still a lot of work to be done by both Moscow and Washington, and of course we will continue with the context as I've mentioned earlier.
It is kind of getting frustrating seeing that US is just letting Russia say all this without actually pushing back publicly, because President Trump wanted Europe to spend more on their defense. Well, European countries in NATO agreed to 5% defense spending. President Trump wanted them to pay for weapons that are going to Ukraine. Now, European countries are actually paying the United States for US weapons that then they are donating to Ukraine. So it seems Europe is really agreeing to a lot of the stuff the US wanted, and it still seems we're just leaving Europe out to dry at a lot of instances. And it still seems that we are not supporting Europe at a lot of the instances that we should. But anyways, let's look at the biggest comment Russia made after the peace talks. They want Ukraine to surrender Donbas. Otherwise, Russia is not agreeing to any peace. Take a listen.
We discussed the territorial issues, without which we do not believe there could be a resolution to this conflict. And of course, we also discussed the great opportunities for the future economic cooperation between the two countries. And we spoke at length about this at the previous meetings as well. But this time we emphasized that if we truly want to cooperate, if we truly want to work together, there is a vast potential for this, and we need to show the real willingness to do this both in Moscow and in Washington. So it was a very useful, very good conversation. And of course, it started with...
In reality, Ukraine will never agree to giving up its territory, and the reason for this is simple. Putin just doesn't have the army and the capabilities to take over what he wants Ukraine to surrender. Then why would Ukraine just give it up? Because Ukraine knows Russia is never sticking to its words, and the territory that Russia wants is heavily fortified, and it's been nicknamed the Fortress Belt. If Ukraine gives it up, it's going to be a lot harder for Ukraine to defend the terrain that comes after it, because they don't have defensive lines, they don't have natural barriers that they can use to push back the Russian army. And this is exactly why Putin wants them to give up the defensive lines that Ukraine currently has. Now, let's just look at mathematically, because Putin wants to talk about how his army is moving through Ukrainian land very quickly. Let's just take the pace that the Russian army has been moving at for the last month, which is a lot faster than what they were moving at for the rest of the year before that. But even at the pace that the Russian army is moving, it would take Russia 2 years to take over what Putin wants Ukraine to just surrender, their Donbas area that's not under the Russian control. But in reality, Putin's economy cannot survive for 2 more years. On top of that, it will take 1 million or even more casualties on the Russian side to even have a chance of taking over this territory. That means if we want peace, we should not be forcing Ukraine to surrender. We should be putting pressure on Russia and Russian economy so they come to the negotiating table and they negotiate a fair peace, not just hope for a surrender. Now, I'm sure you guys have heard, Russia is gaining ground in Pokrov's direction. It's nowhere close to what Putin is claiming. And we have to remember, Putin wanted to capture the city last November 2024. And Russian soldiers are still not safe in the city. Just take a look at this next clip. It's shocking how dangerous it is for everyone involved because Ukrainian drones are everywhere. This is one of the most insane clips I've seen. So watch.
Yeah. This is the one I think you can hear the drones in.
Yeah.
Она упала. Бежим! Стой, тихо! Тихо! Нет, еще за.
Yeah.
Блядь, я 300! 300! 300! Срочно, нога!
Yeah, the audio didn't quite come through.
You did it?
Well, at least not in my headphones, but it it's probably going to come through in the thing. But you can hear that screeching noise.
Yeah.
And there was probably at least 3 drones that hit this. I think these guys were in a shipping container.
Нет, нам пизда.
There's that sound.
Yeah.
Она упала. Бежим! Стой, тихо! Тихо! Нет, еще за.
There it is.
Блядь, я 300! 300! 300! Срочно, нога! Жгут! Блядь!
Well, that's the same guy who was yelling, "Be quiet."
Пацаны! Блядь!
Yeah, when we were looking at the guy in the boat, he had a tourniquet already on
Ready.
his leg.
Which
So,
is not a bad idea, right? Shouldn't that be, like, what could be the downside of that?
No, there isn't. It's not a bad
Okay.
idea. I mean, I don't know how you'd keep it up and not have it fall down your knees, but it's not the worst idea.
Yeah.
You know, I used to keep my tourniquet in my med kit, but in Ukraine, they got a better idea. You wear it on your shoulder, so people don't have to dig around if
Dig
you
around it,
if
yeah.
you need it. Yeah.
Пацаны! Пацаны!
Well,
Oh.
the bad thing for these guys is they had 3 drones hit this house, and there's a drone overhead watching, and they didn't see anyone come out. So they're going to keep hitting this target. And this one guy is wounded. There's a rule we got in the SEALs. First of all, we never send one person anywhere. There's always a swim buddy. And the smallest number of men on a field who can support themselves and bring out a wounded guy is 3. And more often you want 4. But again, these are the sort of things that you teach your soldiers. These guys, who knows what they're doing.
Now, that's just a small part of what we're doing every single week on our brand new series, Battlefield Breakdown. Unfortunately though, a lot of these clips we cannot post here on YouTube because YouTube would just restrict our videos or even delete it. But this is the reality of modern warfare, and I think it's important that we cover it. That's why we built our own platform, Basics Insider. We built it from scratch so we have no restrictions. We don't have someone telling us what we can cover and what we cannot cover. We also don't run any ads. That way, we don't have to worry about what is something advertisers would approve of and what is something an advertiser wouldn't approve of. We run this website through support from you guys. So if you're someone who's interested in watching videos like these and interested in topics that YouTube doesn't want us covering, then you should definitely check out our website, basicsinsider.com. You can also click the link in the description or scan the QR code on your screen. Once you sign up, you'll be able to watch all the videos that we haven't been able to upload here on YouTube. And on top of that, you'll be supporting the channel and supporting our coverage. So thank you so much. My name is Sam. I'll see you guys in the next one.